Welcome to Compelling Tips and Techniques for Passing the New AutoCAD 2013 Certification Exams. This is part one of a two-part series, and I want to thank all of you for spending your valuable time with us today. My name is J.C. Malitsky, and I'm owner of Digital J.C. CAD. My background is I'm a former community college professor and a former department chair. I've been an ATC instructor for 27 years, and I've been using and teaching AutoCAD since 1985. I'm co-author of several AutoCAD textbooks, and I'm an Autodesk certified instructor. Recently, I've been working with Autodesk on their Autodesk Certified Evaluator program, which assists instructors on developing their teaching and presentation skills. This exam prep class is based on taking the previous exams over the years and passing them, and there's just been too many years to remember. But your goal is to pass the AutoCAD 2013 certification exams. At the end of this class, you will be able to develop time-saving strategies for navigating the exam objectives and develop time-saving study and preparation techniques based on the exam objectives. And at the end, we're going to explore additional resources for study and preparation. And hopefully, you will develop a level of comfort for passing the AutoCAD certification exams. But the real key to this class is to understand what to study and what not to study based on the objectives of the exam. And these are the AutoCAD commands that we're going to cover in part one of this two-part series. The data sets used in this presentation are not used in any of the AutoCAD certification exams. And no AutoCAD certification exams questions will be used or discussed. And this class is designed to work through as many exam objectives as time permits, highlighting time-saving tips and techniques for methods of study and preparation. There are no guarantees that taking this class you will pass any of the AutoCAD certification exams. But I hope you do. So let's get started. Let's set the tools for the skills performance hands-on portion of the exam. The first thing you can do is go in to set polar tracking to 90 degrees. Now, whether you use the icons or the words in the status area, you can do a right click to set it to 90 degrees. Next, go in and set your running object snaps. Make sure you turn on object snap, and then set your object snaps to endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, and insertion. And make sure your object snaps are turned on so you can use those 5 as running object snaps. Turn on your object snap tracking. You may want to turn on Show Hide Transparency. Now, these are the tools that I turn on every day, but you may not really need Show Hide Transparency. It's just something that I've been doing over the years. Also, turn on your Properties palette. Dock your Properties palette to the right or the left, or float it. But do set the Properties palette, because you may be using it throughout the exam. So before you start the exam, launch AutoCAD 2013. Go in and set up AutoCAD the way you like it. Set your options, float the command line, dock it high, dock it low, dock it right, dock it left, whatever. But set your command line the way you like it. Turn on Properties and set the other tools that we have just talked about. Then sit back and relax. Go in and launch the exam, and you'll be all set, ready to go. For our first group of AutoCAD 2013 objectives, We're going to look at copy, move, mirror, and rotate objects. But we're going to concentrate just on rotating objects. The second objective is to use rotation reference angles. So let's take a look at rotating objects with and without rotation reference angles. For our first AutoCAD 2013 objectives, we're going to use that circle as a hole drilled through that part to rotate objects and to use rotation reference angles. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to go into Rotate and select that circle. And our engineering change order requires us that that circle be rotated to 128 degrees. I'm going to select the center point as the center of that hub projection. And I do call your attention to the center running object snap. And remember, we set that in Tools. So I'm going to go ahead and specify the center point, and then I'm going to specify the rotation angle. Well, it's quite simple. 128 minus 24 is 104. So I'm going to rotate that part to 104 degrees from the 24 that we were at. If you know both angles, the start angle and the end angle, subtract, and that's where we came up again with 104. In our second scenario, let's take a look at doing the same thing, but let's establish a copy of that circle. So I'm going to go into Rotate again and select the circle and select the center of the hub projection again, but I do want to call your attention to the bottom of the screen. The subcommands or command options, whatever you want to call them, of copy and reference can now be selected in the command line. Remember, years ago we would always press C enter or R enter, or we could go in and right click, pop-up menu would pop up and we would go copy or reference to select copy or reference. Well, now in AutoCAD 2013 we just select the words in the command line. So with that, I'm going to go in and select copy, and I'm going to copy that circle to 104 degrees. So 104 plus 24 equals 128. So I was able to create that copy using copy from the command line. Let's take a look at the third scenario. In the third scenario, we need to copy that. Wait a second. Where's the 24 degrees? Now we need to copy that to 128. We don't know what that angle is. So I'm going to go in and rotate that circle again. I'm going to use the center again as my base point, but now I'm going to come down and select reference to select a reference angle. And I need to establish that angle since I don't know what it is. And I'm going to establish it by the center of the hub projection to the, nope, don't want to go to the end point of the line, because why? We don't know where the line goes through. Does it go through the exact center of that circle? We can't assume that. So make sure that you go to the object center of where you're going to rotate it to, and now establish the angle. And the angle is 128. When you establish a reference angle, use the angle to which you want to rotate to. So what you need to study here is the command, the subcommands, or the command options, and how to manipulate objects to rotate and how to use rotation reference angles. Here's a simple part that we created, and we're going to go over a section later on in part 2 using grips, but I do want to call your attention to select that object, which is a block. And that block reference has the grip point right on the insertion point of that block. So I'm going to go ahead and select that grip, and I do call your attention to the bottom of the screen as I cycle through stretch, move, and now get to rotate. And I'm cycling through by selecting the spacebar or the enter key. And again, I want to call your attention to the bottom of the screen where I could use base point, copy, undo, reference, or exit by using grips. And now when I come in, I can rotate to whatever angle I want. I can just specify an angle by dragging it, or if I wanted to rotate that to 45 degrees, because I know it's sitting horizontal, I can type in 45 and my part will rotate. Our next AutoCAD objective is to offset objects. And if we use this simple extrusion with the polyline boundary to represent that extrusion, we can offset inward or outward. We can use the source object, or we can use the current layer's properties to offset to. We can also erase the source object. So let's take a look. Let's look at the offset command to offset this polyline, which represents an extruded part. When I go into offset, that offset has three subcommands or command features: through, erase, and layer. And I could go through a point that I just pick in space, or I can specify a distance. And in this case, I'm going to specify the distance of 1.5. I'm going to go ahead and select the object, and I could offset inward or outward depending on where I place my cursor. Offset to the outside. So now I've created a new offset of that object. So it parallels it, so to speak, or makes a direct copy on the outside or inside. That's quite simple. Let's take a look at another way to do offset. So I'm going to go in offset, and this time I'm going to come down and select the layer option. And the layer option could be a source or the current. Well, I'm going to go to the current layer. I'm going to specify a distance of 1.5. I'm going to select the object and again go inward or outward. In this case, when I use the layer option, it goes to the current layer, which is the section layer. And in many cases, that's what we want to do. We really want to offset to a different layer. In our third option, we can go in and erase the current object that we select. So I'm going to go into offset, and this time I'm going to go into erase. Erase yes or no? Well, yes, I'm going to erase yes. So I'm going to select yes, and now it prompts me for the distance. I'm going to type in that same 1.5, and then offset the object inward 1.5 units. And you notice that the original source object was deleted. We need to look at offset through a point, specifying a distance, specifying how we use different layers from source and current, and that we can erase the source object. But let's take a look at the area of this object to see that we really did change that. So notice that I have the property palette docked to the left, and I can select that polyline object. And if I come in here, I can take a look at the area. The area is 891, which is different than the original area of 1200. It also gives me the length of that polyline. So if I needed to know that, the length is 200. By offsetting the part inward or offsetting the part outward, I can look at the properties of the new polyline. Our next group of AutoCAD 2013 objectives is to look at using hatching and to calculate the area of objects. So let's take a look at these two objectives. Let's look at hatch and hatch edit, and then we'll take a look at area. So I'm going to go in to hatch this part, simple polyline with 3 holes drilled through it as circles. I'm going to pick that internal point, press enter, and wow, this is terrible. The hatch pattern is going right through the circles. The scale's wrong. The angle's wrong. I do not even know if this is associative. You know what? I'm just going to undo that. It just doesn't look right at all. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to go into hatch, pick my internal point, and I do want to call your attention to the hatch creation ribbon at the top of the screen. My hatch pattern is associative, so it is locked to the geometry that's on the screen. But also what I need to do is to change that hatch scale to 0.25. And I need to change the hatch angle to 0. There we go. That looks pretty good. So I like that hatch pattern. No. I don't like that hatch pattern. The dimension line, the hatch lines go right through. This is just not good. I'm not doing well at all. If I select the hatch pattern to edit this, I move my cursor over the multi-function hatch grip, and I could go in and edit this hatch pattern by stretching, changing the origin point, the hatch angle, or the hatch scale. Or I can go into the hatch editor ribbon. So I do call your attention again to the top of the screen. I am associative, my angle is correct, my scale is correct, but I'm going to come down to options, and I notice that my island detection is way off. So somebody didn't leave it at normal island detection to be able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and close the hatch editor, and finally, ladies and gentlemen, I've got my hatch pattern the way I wanted it. So what do you need to study? Make sure that you look at all the different methods to create and edit hatch patterns. And you don't fall into some of the traps that I have just fallen in showing you how to do this. So that gives you a good workflow and strategy to follow. Let's take a look at area. Let's look at finding the area of this flat surface of this plate with the 3 holes drilled through it. The first thing that I can do is go up to Utilities, the Measure Geom command, and select Area. At the bottom of the screen, I'm going to go in and select Add Area, then Object, and select the polyline boundary. I'm going to press Enter and then go to Subtract Area, Object, and select the 3 holes. So by defining what we add and what we subtract, we have a total area of 494.4. Okay? Another way that we could do that is to go into Hatch. If I go into Hatch and pick that internal point, I have a hatch pattern defined. If I select the hatch pattern, go into my Properties palette, my area is 494.4. So you have 2 different methods to find hatch. As time permits, I try both different ways to double check my work, but that's if you have time. And the other thing is that the tools that I showed you before at the beginning of today's presentation, another tool that you could set and keep open is the Properties palette. Let's take a look at the next group of AutoCAD 2013 objectives. We want to create a radius between objects using the fillet command. We're going to trim and extend objects. We're going to break and join objects. And then we're going to use selection set methods. So let's take a look. Let's apply some fillets to the objects. So I'm going to go into the fillet command, and I call your attention to the bottom of the screen. We have our 0 radius fillet. So I'm going to go into radius, and I'm going to set the radius to 0.5. And when I go into the radius of 0.5, AutoCAD prompts me to select my first object. But again, look at the subcommands or command options of undo, polyline, radius, trim, and multiple. I'm just going to go in first though and select line, and then the vertical line, and hit the space bar or enter key and repeat, and hit the space bar and the enter key and repeat, hit the space bar and enter and repeat until we create the fillets needed. Now, on productivity scale, that's pretty slow. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that, and then I'm going to come back and apply the fillets again. I'm going to set my radius to 0.5. I'm going to go in this time and select multiple. So I'm going to pick the word multiple, and now as I go along, I just pick the lines without hitting the space bar or anything, and I can speed up the process of using multiple. If you've not used multiple before, make sure you go in and take a look at how multiple works. Let's take another example. The other example that I have is this polyline. So I'm going to go into fillet and select polyline. I'm going to keep my radius at 0.5 and just select the polyline. and notice the 4 corners have been filleted. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to create a fillet again. But this time when I create the fillet, I'm going to put a fillet of 0.5 on that corner, and then I'm going to come into the fillet and I'm going to select fillet again, but I'm going to change the radius to 1. And when I reset the radius to 1, if I select the horizontal and vertical lines, I could have fillets on polylines with different radius. So that's kind of cool. Let's go in and see if we could put a fillet on this object. I'm going to go into fillet. They seem to intersect out in space. I'm going to set my radius to 0.5. And I'm going to fillet these 2 lines. Now when I fillet those 2 lines, they do come together. If I hit the space bar, I'm going to go ahead and fillet again, and you get the idea. But if I undo, what if I want those to come to a sharp point? If I go into fillet and set my radius to 0, so I have a 0 radius fillet, I select my first line. I'm going to zoom this up a little bit. And as I go to select my second line, I get a preview marker of where the fillet will end. Oh, is that great or what? Let's try that again. Right there, slowly hover. There's my preview. Do it again. Hover and preview. And so I have a preview marker on fillet 0 in this case. Let's take a look at one more example for fillet. And there are many examples on fillets. But let's do one more. I need to put a cap on the ends of this slot that are going to be drilled into, or milled into, I should say, this plate. Radius is set to 0. I don't have a radius. I don't know what the radius is. But will these lines fillet? Well, of course they will. So parallel lines will fillet to create that slot. So what should you study? Go into the Help menu, go into the Prep Materials, and take a look at all the different methods to create fillets and on what objects fillets can be created. Let's go in and use Trim and Extend. I'm going to go into the Trim command, and I'm going to select all the objects by pressing the Enter key or the space bar. But I do want to call your attention to the bottom of the screen. And look at the subcommands or the command options. Fence and crossing and project and edge and erase and undo. Again, you need to look over all of those command options or subcommands to understand what the Trim command does. But also take a look at what it says above. Use the Shift key and select the object to extend. So if you're in Trim, hold Shift, it goes to Extend. So if you're in Extend and hold Shift, it goes into Trim. So that's been around for quite a while, but what a great tool. So that's why we always say Trim and Extend in one command. So I'm going to go in and use my pick box, and I'm going to come in and just pick the objects that I want to trim. Very simple and basic, and I know you do that every day. But I'm going to go into Fence, and I'm going to create a fence around this object here. And notice how the lines are being highlighted as I go across. There's my selection set. Press Enter, and there I've trimmed off my objects. Let's go into Extend. If I go into Extend, I can go into Extend the objects by selecting them. But no, I want to go in and select all, just like I did in the Trim command. So I'm going to go back into Extend, press the Enter key to select all the objects, and now start selecting, and you could see how we can extend objects. I can go into Fence and put a fence across here. Press Enter, and the objects will extend over. So again, the key is, in workflow and actually for speed, is when you use Trim or Extend, make sure you hit the Enter key or space bar to select all the objects. And then if you wanted to go from Trim to Extend while you're in the Trim command, use the Shift key. Let's take a look at another Extend. I'm going to extend this line to this line, just like I'm closing off a wall. Wait a second, that didn't work. Let me try that again. Extend, I'll try it on the top lines. Nothing's happening. I wonder why. Well, if I go into extend and I press enter, I come down to edge. And now I'm in edge mode to extend. So I'm going to extend that edge. And now as I start to click on my lines, you can see how AutoCAD will extend that edge. So again, you have crossings and fences and projects and edges and undo inside the extend command. Let's take a look at selection sets. When we go in to create selection sets, what I need to do is to come in and erase some of these objects that are in this plate. So if I go into erase, I can go into erase and use my pick box to select objects. Well, we all know that. But the selection set methods that I can create otherwise is what? Crossing. And what's a crossing? Crossing is a dashed line, and any object that touches or is inside the crossing becomes part of the selection set. The opposite of crossing is window, and window is the opposite way from left to right, where crossing is from right to left. So if I go ahead and do a crossing of those objects, there's a crossing, and I press enter and my objects go away. If I do a window, if I erase by a window, I go from left to right. And again, in AutoCAD 2013, notice how the objects highlight. But you must be inside the window to erase. So the difference between crossing and window, and I ask this question when I'm teaching my college credit students in a beginning AutoCAD class, how can you differentiate between a crossing and a window? A crossing is dashed and a window is solid lines. It's not green and it's not blue. It's got to be solid or dashed or dotted lines. So there's my object on a window, press enter, and away it goes. If I go into erase again, I can go into erase. And when I go into erase, I could do CP. In CP for crossing polygon. And I can create a crossing polygon over the objects that I want to erase. And there they are. And press enter, and the objects will erase. If there's a crossing polygon, there must be a window polygon. So WP for window polygon. And I can create a window polygon by picking objects. And again, the window polygon is a solid object, a solid window. And I press enter. And my objects can go away. And the last one, of course, was fence. So if I go into erase, press F for fence, I could just draw a fence like I showed before in trimming to fence and take objects out. So to review, we have pick boxes, windows, crossings, window polygons, crossing polygons, and fence. So study over all the different selection set methods of creation. Let's go in and break some objects. So I'm going to zoom in on this circle, and I need to break out this lower right quadrant of the circle. So I'm going to go into break. I'm going to select the object, and AutoCAD prompts me for the second break point. But also I can select first point. So I call your attention to the command line, and I'm going to select first point. And I'm going to select 0 degrees and come down to 270. And oh, wait a second. It's just the opposite of what I wanted. It broke out the opposite side, not the quadrant that I wanted. Well, let me undo that. Let's try that again. I'm going to go into break. I'm going to select the circle. First point, I'm going to start at 270, bring it up to about 0. And there, that's what I wanted to break out. So what did we learn? We learned that a circle or an arc is created counterclockwise. So we need to make sure that our break first and second points are in the appropriate first point and second point order. So when you study break, make sure you look at that on circles and arcs. Let's see on a line. Well, this should be real simple. If I just go into break, I'll say that's my first point. I can come over here for my second point, and I could break that out. So that's real simple, of course, on a line. But do study breaking, circles, arcs, P-lines, splines, lines, etc. Many of the AutoCAD objects need to be broken during the design process. So practice and give that a try. Let's go in and let's join the objects back together. So I'm going to go into join, and AutoCAD prompts me to join the source object or multiple objects to join at once. I'm going to select the end of that one line. I'm going to join it to the other line, press enter, and that's real simple. We can join that together. Let's see if we can join this arc. Let's see if we can bring that back to a circle. So I'm going to go into join. I'm going to select the arc, and it says to select objects to join or other objects to join. Well, I don't have any other objects to join, so I'm going to press enter, and oh, I noticed there's close. So if I come down into command line, I select close, the arc has been converted back to a circle. So that's very interesting. Let's try a few other objects to join. Here we have two lines. They're not in alignment, but let's go into join. Let's select the first object. Let's select the second object. Let's see if we can join these together. I'm going to press enter, and nope, that's not going to work. Well, let's see what else we can join. And here it looks like we have some polylines and splines and arcs and different objects that we can take a look at. This looks like these may be two polylines or two splines. I'm going to go into join, and I'm going to select that first object. Let me zoom that in so we can see that. Yes, there's two of them here. I'm going to select the second object, and I don't know what that object is. Again, it could be a spline or a P-line, but I'm joining those together. Press enter, and now I've taken the two objects and joined them into one spline. So that worked. Let's take a look at the next option. Let's see if we can join then this arc into that spline. So I'm going to go into join. I'm going to pick this object. I'm going to pick this object to join. Press enter, and nope, that didn't work. Let's see if we can join these. I know we could fillet 0 them. I wonder if these will go together and join. So I'm going to go into join. I'm going to join this object to this object, and I'm going to press enter. Now, those don't work either. You know what? Some of this worked and some of this didn't. I think I need some help. And I'm going to go into help, and I'm going to type in join, because for join and break, I use these commands not that often, but often enough that I should know what's going on, but I'm having some problems. So one of the things and tips and techniques that I do is I use the help menu to help me study for and plan a workflow of study and preparation. I really like the help menu. So for example, I go into join, and it tells me what join does, that it joins objects of linear and curved objects to create a single object. Well, I sort of know that, but if I scroll down, I keep reading of all the different source objects that I can select and how it puts together or multiple objects to join at once and any related concepts. So I would go ahead and read over this, or look in the official prep materials about join and break or fillet and chamfer, trim and extend, any of the commands. I'm going to go into join objects, so I'll select another one, join objects. So it walks me through how to join these objects. And then I know I've got another related one, to join splines, arcs, lines into a single polyline. Well, what is this one about? So you can see here's one about breaking and joining objects. And again, looking at help to help me study and develop a workflow and any of the other related tasks that I would need to study and prepare for the certification exams. So don't be afraid to go into the help menu to take a look at some of the different commands and options and workflows within each AutoCAD command. Our next AutoCAD 2013 objective is to create and edit polylines. Let's look at creating and editing polylines. I'm going to go into the polyline command, and AutoCAD has prompting me to specify the first start point. So I'm going to pick that first start point, and then I notice the subcommands or the command options of arc and half width and length and undo and width. So we have some options that we can use as we're creating this polyline. So if I go down and select the word arc, remember I do not have to press enter or right click arc. In AutoCAD 2013 I can go right down into the command line and select what I would like to do. Now I'm in arc and I could create that arc. Now since I'm in the arc option, I notice that I have many new command options that I can use. So I can go into a radius, and maybe I want to set my radius to 2 units. So as I created that radius, now I set that to 2 for what I was creating. I can go back and select line to bring it back to line, and then I could go in and select close to close that polyline off. So what did I use? I used some lines, I used arcs, I used radius, I used close. So I looked at using as many different polyline creation options as possible. And that's a direction that you need to look at when you develop your workflow for study and preparation. I'm going to go in and erase that. Let's create a different polyline with some of the other commands. So I'm going to go in and start with the polyline. I'm going to come down to arc. I always like to put an arc on my polyline. I'm going to come down to width, and I'm going to set my width to a small width. So just my start width and end width is just a little bit larger. So you can see that it's a little bit larger. If I want to change my width to go a little bit larger than that, I can go ahead and do that for my start width and my end width. So I can change to different widths to be able to do that. I'm going to go back to line and select line, and then I'm going to go ahead and close that off. So creating this is a weird shaped polyline with, again, different options from arcs to lines to widths and different types of widths and closes. So creating those polylines, you can have many different options and methods. Let's take a look at these polylines that are created here. The first thing that I've noticed is that these polylines, here's a polyline that has width, and this is a pentagon. This is a polygon. A polygon is a polyline. A rectangle is a polyline. And here's a different shaped polyline. So if I double click on this polyline, I can go in to edit that polyline. And one of the things that I can do is I could fit curve it. It actually comes out to be a circle the way that rectangle was created. I'm going to go in and undo that. I can double click on this polyline. As I double click on this polyline, I notice that I can go, and maybe I'm going to spline this one and get a shape of a spline through the control points. Or I can go fit through the fit data points. Or I can go back and decurve it and bring it back to the beginning the way it was created. I'm going to zoom up on this polyline here. This polyline looks like it has width, it has arc, it has lines. It probably had a radius, it probably was closed. And I'm going to go in and explode polyline. I know it's not a great technique, but I want to see, oh, wait a second. This was a line, this was an arc, this was a line, this was an arc, this was an arc. So there's between lines and arcs, and it could be polylines that originally created this object. So can I take dissimilar types of objects and create a polyline from that? And the answer is yes. If I come into modify, I'm going to pin that modify down. I can come in to polyline edit to edit a polyline. So I go into the pedit command. Pedit has multiple options. I'm not going to use that today, but I'm going to go ahead and select this line. I don't have the system variable set, so it will automatically accept the word yes. I wanted to show you, yes, I want to turn that line into a polyline. And then what do I want to do? Well, if I wanted to recreate that polyline, I'll just go to join, and I could join all of these objects together. I'm going to use a crossing window to do that. And now I have created that new polyline. So again, to create polylines, you can pedit, use dissimilar objects that were created to create a new polyline. The other thing that I can do to edit polylines is if I select that polyline, I have the option of using multifunction grips. I can stretch the vertex, add vertex, or remove the vertex. So I'm going to remove the vertex and let's see what happens. It went to a straight line. Maybe I want to come to this grip and go ahead and hover over and convert to line. No, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to go over, hover over, convert to an arc. So depending on how that polyline was created or edited, our multi-function grips give us different options. So maybe I want to stretch the vertex. I want to pull that one over there. Or in this case over here, I want to hover over this grip. And I want to add a vertex point. And now I've added more vertex points to work with. So I can go ahead and stretch that vertex. So creating and editing polylines is important to the design process. Our next AutoCAD 2013 objectives are to create dimensions and to edit dimensions. As you know, the topic of dimensions is huge, and this is one of those high-level objective areas where you need to develop a good workflow for study and preparation. So let's take a look at how to create some of the dimensions and also to use some of the editing tools. Let's go in and create some simple dimensions on this part. If you look at the part, I already have some dimensions. I have some linear dimensions, I have an angular dimension, and I have a radius and diameter dimension. I call your attention to the dimension panel from the Annotate tab, and you need to look over all the different methods to create dimensions. So if I need to put an aligned dimension in, how do you put an aligned dimension in on a part? And I know many of you dimension every single day, but go over all the different dimensioning techniques that you see here on the dimension panel. So that's to create those. I can also go in to create dimensions by baseline. If I press enter, I could select this baseline dimension. Now let's not grade my dimensioning here. I'm going to go ahead and put those dimensions in. So I did a baseline off that existing linear dimension that was there. I can go in and put a continue dimension and select the continue dimension to move across the screen. So baseline, continue, linear, angular, aligned, radius, diameter, ordinate, jogged. Look at all the different methods for creating dimensions and develop a workflow for study. Let's go in and use some of the dimension tools to edit our dimensions. The first tool that I use is grips. So I could come in here with grips and reposition the text and dimensions where I would like them. So I actually start this off when I teach my college credit classes or my ATC classes. I can also hover over a grip and get the multi-function grip options. So you need to spend some time to go over what all of those are. I notice that my spacing is off, so I can go in to adjust the space. So if I go into adjust space, I can select the dimensions that I want to adjust the space on and then set a value. And if I set the value, the dimensions space accordingly. But I notice that I need to break a dimension. So I can go into dimension break, select the dimension, and when I select the dimension, it will break away from the objects. So we can break dimensions, and that spacing is set in the dimension style. I can go into my continue and baseline, which we already did, and I can go into inspection dimensions and put inspection dimensions on. I could also go in and set different text angle. I could go into justify left, justify center, or justify right. So I noticed that one of my pieces of text just does not look in the correct position. So I'm going to justify center to select that, and the object will justify center. On the 3-unit dimension, maybe I want to justify right or justify left. Well, I justify left and it goes all the way down to the bottom. Now, you know what? I better go back to justify center. There we go. That's in a nice location. I can also go in and oblique the dimension. So if I oblique the dimension, I could select the dimension, specify the angle. So let's say I was doing an isometric drawing. I could specify 30 degrees, and there my dimension can be obliqued. So you need to take a look at all the different dimension edit tools so you can prepare and develop a workflow for study and preparation. Let's go into stretch objects as our next AutoCAD 2013 objective. We have created dimensions and edited dimensions on this simple part, but an engineering change order tells us that we need to take that 4 units along the top with the large circle and stretch it to the left 2 more units. So I'm going to go into the stretch command, and the stretch command prompts us to select the objects by a crossing window or crossing polygon, and that's the key. So I'm going to select lower right to upper left. And in AutoCAD 2013, it will highlight the objects that I need to select. And in this case, I've encompassed a circle, the horizontal, vertical lines, and a dimension. And I'm going to go ahead and select. It prompts me to select more objects, but there's nothing more that I need to select. So I'm just going to go ahead and press enter. Now it prompts for base point or displacement. And I've always used base point. So where can I select the base point? Can I select it on the very corner? Can I select the dimension? Can I select the center of the circle? Or can I just select out in space? Well, I can just select out in space, and then using tracking, because remember we turned on tracking, I can use tracking and drag my distance out. But of course I want to be accurate, so I'm going to just type in 2 to make the distance a total of 6 units. And that's how simple the stretch command is. In closing, let's look at the Autodesk certification information and additional resources. Your start point is at autodesk.com/certification, where you can get information about all the Autodesk certification exams. I would like you to check out the Autodesk certification official prep materials. And these prep materials are provided by Wiley Cybex and Ascent. And these prep materials are not only for AutoCAD 2013, but for other Autodesk certification exams. But you need to start to develop your workflow. And let me give you just 6 of the topics that we have discussed for review today. Study only what the objectives address, and I know I've said this many times throughout today's presentation. Study the related commands to those objectives. Study the subcommands or the command options, and use the help menu to study. Also, use prep materials as needed, and then use the drawings that you use every day at work. And they will help you to develop that workflow for study and preparation. As time permits, check out this virtual class. Find your success with Autodesk Professional Certification. And I want to thank you for spending your valuable time with us today. And hopefully I've addressed the course objectives and as many exam objectives as possible, and that you will start to develop a study and preparation workflow strategy to pass the exams. And good luck on passing the AutoCAD 2013 certification exams.